Hi, thanks for joining us for Advanced Bereshit for Beginners. This week, we explore a few topics related to the fourth chapter of Bereshit. We try to delve into the psychology of Kayin using the lens of objectivist philosopher Ayn Rand and the theory of corporeal election propounded by Michael Wyschogrod. Enjoy.
What are we talking about? Should I just check out a
You
Lemech?
can take out, yeah, you can take out the Lemech. So we're going to try to cover a couple of topics. We finished Parak Daled. So what I wanted to do is cover a couple interesting things to consider in reviewing the chapter. The first thing I will point out is something that Rabbi Professor Moshe David Kasuto goes through and counts the different names of God, and he totals up at the end of this parak 40 times that it mentions the name Elohim, 20 times Hashem Elohim, and 10 times Hashem, which together totals 70. It's another heptad of, another instance of the pattern of 7 being used, and it seems very intentional that over the course of these 4 chapters, the name is used the exact right number of times in order to equal up to 70.
Mm-hmm.
The academics who are still in support of biblical criticism and the documentary hypothesis will tell you, oh no, this chapter was written by these people, and that
About
chapter
this
was written,
God, and
right, and that chapter was written by those people,
and
but
then they mixed it together with the
right,
thing.
but the odds that multiple separate authors
Right.
can kind of combine to get you to that sweet number 70 is
a little forced.
it's
And
far-fetched.
just some later editor did a patch job. It's
Right.
fine.
But like a perfect patch job.
Right.
Okay, so the next thing I want to point out is the parallels between the sin of Adam and Chava and the sin of Cain. I think we've talked before about what's called a type scene, right? So that's where you have a scene that repeats in different stories in Tanakh, men meeting their wives by wells, right? So that happens multiple times, and you as a reader, a listener, every time you see that type scene, you're like, oh, I know what this is about. It's going to follow this certain pattern. And the reason that it's so powerful is when you break the scene, right? So
When
here,
you subvert the expectations.
exactly.
TV tropes. Thank you.
Yes. So here it's not even a type scene, it's almost a direct parallel in that you have almost like verbatim one scene after the other that is so similar. So you have God approaches the sinner with a rhetorical question. You have the sinner sort of evading, the question and giving this sort of elusive response. You have God using the same language. Ma'asisa, what did you do? We have it by Adam and Chava, and we have it by Cain. You have the fact that the sinner is not killed. You have the punishment being related to the land. You have the sinner being cast out or away from God. The sinner's response to the punishment, and then God providing some sort of protection. With Adam and Chava, it's clothing. With Cain, it's a sign, right? So you have like multiple examples showing that these two scenes, one following right after the other, are designed to be similar, and then you have basically one difference, and that difference is Cain responding that he sinned, and Adam responding that he didn't sin, right? Or evading the fact that the responsibility and the fact that he sinned. So the parallel is there not just as a as a literary technique to show you, hey, these two things are similar, but it's to draw your attention to the differences between the two of them intentionally. Okay, let's do key takeaways. So, Cain. Where do we want to start with this? So the picture that we painted of Cain was, maybe it's too much to say intentionally misleading, but was a little rosier than maybe it should be, and I will explain why I think that is. So
we're swinging the pendulum this way.
Right.
The pendulum is normally over here, and really it's probably
right. So I think it's important to not read Cain as like Snidely Whiplash, right? We tend to, like he's a villain, right? So we're just gonna cast him as villain. I think it's important to try to understand that Cain is the hero in Cain's story, right? Like, what is he trying to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I think it's just interesting to point out that all the halachos of how you deal with the dead, the halachos of Avelus in the
They
Rambam.
come from here.
So no, they actually. Well, I'll read you the Rambam inside. Mitzvahs aseh shel divreim. There's a mitzvah dirabanan lenachem avelim lahotzi hames lisazik b'chol tzarchei hakvura. All the things you have to do for someone who's passed away. Leilech lefanav lispo lachbor v'likbor. I'm sort of paraphrasing because he also brings in chassan and kala, but I'm leaving that out. Afal pishu kol mitzvahs elu midivreihem. Even though all these mitzvahs are dirabanan, harehem bechlal. Where do they all fall under? What's the Torah source for all this? V'yahavta l'reacha kamocha.
Okay.
Right. So to me, there's shades already of like the breakdown between Cain and his brother is what triggers all of this, even in a halachic sense. But I think so. When we talked about, if you remember way back, when we talked about the Navi Edo and the Yeravam ben Nevat had sort of like separated, and there was the Navi who told him to return, and that whole story.
Mi Barosh and all that. Yeah.
Right. So part of what we try to describe over there is like what were they trying to accomplish, and there's this idea that whenever there's a break
with the not inviting God to the party and the whole thing.
Right.
I remember. We should review that, by the way.
Yeah.
We should do that over again. It's been a while.
Okay, we can do Chazara. Whenever there is a rupture, when sin has caused a fissure between God and man, so there are people who take it upon themselves to repair that, right?
Right.
For good or for bad, and it's a very delicate balance.
Right. If you do it uninvited, you're going to get torn apart by animals or whatever.
Correct. So I think that what Cain was trying to accomplish was more than just, I want to have a good relationship with God, so I'm going to bring a carbon so that we can be close. I think that Cain is looking at the sin of Adam Harishon and saying, I have to fix this, right? He's not just farming because he wants to, take up the family trade. He's farming because he says, okay, the land was cursed, Adam was cursed. I need to do something about that. I'm going to take that curse and I'm going to work at it and offer it back up to God, and then the whole thing is fixed, right? Like, game over. We're at the end. Mashiach can come. I did it. I took care of everything.
And then when he fails,
right? So. That's exactly the problem. God comes to him and he says to him, Im tetiv se'eit, right? Like, if you do better, things will be a little bit better. In other words, you misunderstood. This is not a situation where you can flip the switch and fix it. This is now, you're in the world of process, and all you can do is better. You can do better and better, and you can move along ploddingly, methodically, meticulously, step by step, and you'll get there. We'll get to Mashiach eventually, but this is not something where you can hurdle the whole process. You have to go through the process now.
If you screw up big with the wife, you can't just flowers, I'm sorry, and it's okay, you got to work a little bit. You might have to sweat a little bit.
Right. Like, I get it. You innovated, and I see what you're trying to accomplish, and that's great, but step by step, right? And
he loses his mind over it.
Yeah, he really loses his mind over that. He doesn't want to deal with process. So instead, what he decides to do, the way I look at it is, there's a difference between fixing a break in the system and fixing a broken system.
Yeah.
And so that really is what gets us to Ayn Rand.
Right, but it's also, it's not just that. It's God tells him, you're in the world of process, do better. But at the same time, he sees his brother, and his brother gets favored. It's almost like his brother is succeeding where he's failing, and God's not. It's like God's telling him, you don't have the capability to do what your brother can do. Like, even though you're the hero of the story,
right?
Like nah, he came along and just did it.
Right.
Like, go off to the side and play with your Legos and your trucks.
Nice try.
Right, nice try. All right, and we're gonna go over here, and he can't deal with it.
So Ayn Rand talks about objectivism, but dealing with a broken system as opposed to a break in the system.
Right.
And her whole philosophy, is embodied by this guy John Galt, is if the system is broken, then you can't repair it. You have to destroy it. And I'll read you one quote that I think encapsulates this. The protagonist one of the protagonists in the story, besides Jean Galt, is this woman, and she describes seeing someone who was like a producer, someone who was like a contributing member of society in court. And she says when she saw Ken Danager in the court today, she said that he was ready for the destroyer. Yes, that's the words she used. He was ready for the destroyer. You see, she doesn't think it's happening by accident or chance. She thinks there's a system behind it, an intention, a man. There's a destroyer loose in the country who's cutting down the buttresses one after another to let the structure collapse upon our heads. Some ruthless creature moved by some inconceivable purpose. The idea being, if the system is broken, then don't try to fix it, break it. Completely break it. And that's what Cain sets out to do. He doesn't set out to kill Hevel because he's jealous of Hevel. He sets out to kill Hevel because Hevel is B'Tselem Elokim. If I can't kill God, the next best thing I can do is kill the Tselem Elokim that God has shown favor to.
Right.
Right? And it's worse than that because we talked about Cain being the Kohen.
Right.
The halacha is a Kohen who kills someone is no longer a Kohen.
Right.
He's undone himself. The halacha, I'll read you from the Rambam. It's a Gemara in Brachos. Kohen shaharages hanefesh afal pisha asa tshuva lo yises kapav. Once a Kohen has killed someone, it doesn't matter if he's done tshuva. That's it. He's ost Kohen. He's all done. And that's really what the snake was about, right? The snake wanted to burn down the whole system too. He's like, look, these people are favorited over me, right? For some reason, God has shown more interest in them than he's showing in me. I want to tear down the whole system, right? That's I think why God in his initial message to Cain is referencing the woman, right? We pointed out that there's similarity in language between the curse of the woman and Eilech tishu chasech v'atatim sholbach. The idea is that the system is broken. If you try to do what you're trying to do, Cain, you're just going to mess it up more. You can't come from this approach of it's all or nothing. You have to learn the approach of there's a process. Did we point out? I'm not sure if we did. Did we point out that Cain is a farmer who farms flax, and Hevel grows sheep, which is wool, and that's where you get shatnez from?
No, we did not point that out here.
Okay, so that's something that I think people know, just sort of in the ethos or ether. But it's interesting that
about the tenets here.
It's interesting the Gemara points out that farming flax actually hurts the earth. I thought that was very interesting, that if that's Cain's approach. Okay, so the last point I want to make about this is, where did Cain get this idea from? That you either fix a break in the system or you break the whole broken system. So I will submit to you that he learned it from God. That we talked about the end of the first parak ends with Shabbos and Vayichulu. Right? And God looks at a system that is made with complete din and he says, I have to wipe this out. This cannot stand.
Vayichulu,
right? So Vayichulu, he's Vayichal, he destroys it. And then he starts over with this
174 destroyed.
Correct. So it's not so far-fetched for Cain to say, oh, I know what to do with this. Destroy it. Right?
Let's start over. Let's hit the reset button.
Right. If I can't fix it, then what are we doing? Right?
The pasuk in Kohelet, right? The twisting is so much they can't be straight.
Right.
And then what's the other?
Oh man, I used to know. Yeah.
Right. And the crookedness is such it can't be like
made straight.
You can't do tshuva for it.
Right.
It's over.
What's I think even more interesting about that is that God himself does this again in the end of the next parak.
Right. It's Noach. Okay, guess what? God's doing it.
Right. God's
doing it. I'm in the image of God. Why can't I do it?
Right.
It's my party. I'm gonna flip the card table over.
Right.
You know.
And that seems to be the right approach, almost. Right. It seems to be, well, if that's what God does, then why can't I do that?
Because you're not God.
Because you're not God, and you don't realize that there could be a Noach, right? There could be this one saving grace, which Noach is the Isha Adama. Like Noach is basically Cain 2.0.
Right.
And what Cain doesn't realize is he could be Noach. He could be the one thing that God doesn't go and talk to Hevel.
Right.
God comes and talks to Cain, and he tries to get Cain, like, you could get there.
Right.
He doesn't. I'm not interested in. Like
Right.
I don't want to. I don't want
I
to
don't want to
know
be
that.
the also ran.
Right.
Me Barosh, like you're up in Ben Nevat.
Right.
Okay, you and Ben David,
Right,
are
me
gonna
Barosh.
walk in the Gan Eden together. Okay, who's in charge?
Yes.
Right? Nah, I don't want to be. I don't want to be second fiddle. I don't want to be the guy who has to stand in the Beit HaMikdash.
Okay. Point number 2. Have you ever heard of Beringia?
No.
So Beringia is or was a land bridge between Asia and
so
North
Alaska
America.
and
Right.
Russia.
Right. So the predominant, I think basically the only theory as to how the Americas got populated was
Right.
there was this landmass that disappeared like 10, 11,000 years ago,
Right.
and people migrated down. What was interesting when I was doing some research on it is apparently they believe that it was 70 individuals who originally came across and started populating everything. I thought that was very cute. But we sort of in passing mentioned this idea that maybe there's other people, and I think that's a very interesting idea to dig into. When God says,
Right.
"Vayikach esa adam asher asa," right? He took the man that he made and put him in Gan Eden. Who else would we be talking about, right?
Right.
Who's the man that God didn't make that he would be? And then we ask, well, who's he guarding the garden from? Like, who's out there despoiling gardens?
Right.
There's only Adam, right? We talked about what else? Oh yeah, who's Cain afraid of? Right?
Right.
That Cain's
Whoever
like, oh,
finds
whoever
me
finds
will
who's
kill
going to kill me. There's no
Dude,
one that.
it's you.
Right. It's you or your immediate family who has no interest in killing you. Like, who are you so worried about? And then eventually, Cain marries this woman. This woman just shows up. Now, yes, there's a medrash that says that it's a sister, but even that I have a hard time swallowing. Like,
Yeah.
you killed the brother. You think the sister is going to be like, hey, let's get married and have a family, and I'll settle down with, the
Right.
cursed Cain.
Right.
It sounds like there are people out there.
Yeah.
Right? And if that's the case, then I think what the Torah is aware of that and is telling us a story less about Adam as the first person that God created,
But as the most important person.
as well.
Adam Harishon. He's the Kohen Gadol. He's the head honcho. Like, there could be other humans. He's Adam Harishon.
Right.
I like that. I never thought of it that way before, but I have thought that there's other people.
Well, he's the first person that God made B'Tselem Elokim.
Oh.
There's other people out there. They're not necessarily people you want to get involved with. They go despoil gardens and marry murderers. They exist because they evolved or whatever.
At the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth and all this stuff and all that stuff. But guess what? On day 7, right, all of a sudden, depending on if you read Gerald Schroeder, billions of years later, depending on which perspective you're from a relativistic point of view,
right,
5,000 is 780 years or 14 billion years, both. Guess what? There were other humans.
Right, there were other humans, but there's this is a story of the one human that God decided, I'm going to get involved with this person directly.
Right.
And that's going to take us to Michael Wyschogrod. So Michael Wyschogrod was a recent Orthodox Jewish philosopher whose theory, I believe he calls corporeal election. And what it boils down to is God does this. God chooses almost for no reason, and it's part and parcel of how God relates to creation. He talks about it when he talks about God choosing Abraham, that the Torah doesn't talk about Abraham as a monotheist. You get that in the Medrash, but the Torah just wakes up at Lech Lecha and says God picked this one person and said, I'm going to have a relationship with him for no reason that we can possibly discern. And in so doing, you are able to address or sidestep all of these conversations of Christianity or of other religions that say, well, he did choose the Jews, but now he's changed. They sinned, and therefore, there's no, just like there's no reason that he chose. There's nothing that can undo the choosing, right? It's pure ratzon.
Yeah.
It's not I chose Avram because he's a monotheist, and if you guys figured out how to be like even better monotheists than him, then okay, then I'll go with you, and I'll bounce
this
around.
one's my favorite. That's all. It's like, guess what? I picked that one.
And what's what's so interesting about it is that this is a pattern that you find throughout Tanakh.
Right.
There are
God
people
said it in
chosen.
Rishon Parsha. Not because you're the most holy, righteous,
Right.
not because you're the most numerous. I chose you.
Right.
I chose you. Guess what? That's it. Deal with it. And guess what? Not only are you chosen, but you can't unchoose yourself.
Right. That's it. It
Right.
happened, and what you find as a pattern throughout Tanakh is the younger sibling being chosen over the older sibling.
Right.
So I'm sure you can think of like 10 examples just from Bereshit of like Yitzchak being chosen over Yishmael, and Avram is like, Lu Yishmael Yichel Fenecha, like what's wrong with Yishmael? That's it. Sorry, you're getting Yitzchak, and you're getting Yaakov over Esav, and you're getting
Moshe
Rachel
over
over
Aaron.
Moshe over Aaron, all the way down to like David is the youngest of all
Right,
of them.
and nobody wants to anything to do
Shlomo's,
with them.
yeah.
Right.
They're just chosen. That's it. There's no
Wow.
welcome. You're chosen because you're chosen, and that goes back now to Adam Arishon. That why did God wake up at this point in history and decide that He's going to just get involved with this one human being? Because that's what God does. He chooses to have relationships. That's what He does.
It's unbelievable to think about it that way.
Yeah, it is, and it really is. It stems from creation itself. There's a very interesting Maimer Chazal that says the lower waters, when God divided between the Mayim Elyon and the Mayim Tachtonim, the lower waters complained. They said, that's not fair. Why did you choose the upper waters to be the upper waters and we're stuck down here? And God's like, I hear you. To remedy that, the Jewish people are going to bring salt. Every time there's a korban on the Mizbeach, they have to bring some salt with it because the salt comes from the salt water of the ocean, and therefore you have a chance for the salt to feel like it's close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But he doesn't say, you're right, it's not fair, I'll solve the problem.
Right, we're not communists.
Right, I chose, that one's very smoky.
Very smoky?
Fair warning.
That's right.
I chose this over that, and that's how I work. That is how God operates in the world from the very essence of Bereshit through Adam, through Abraham, and that choosing affects the history of mankind, right?
Right, and often murderously.
Yeah.
You're the favorite.
Yeah.
For that I hate you.
Look at what happened with Kayin and Hevel.
Right.
You understand Kain's feeling of, well, why did you choose Hevel? Because I chose Hevel.
Right.
There's no reason. There's nothing you can do, Kayin, that will make me not choose Hevel.
God,
You could
Jewish
also,
people.
yeah.
Hey, guess what, nations of the world? Sorry, you're out of luck.
Right.
Huh?
It sucks, and it helps you understand the frustration, but it's a fact of life. It's a fact of how God operates in creation.
Yeah. That's a heavy. There's a lot to unpack.
There's a lot.
Like we're scratching the surface of like how you're tapping along like you're trying to find something like you find there's something underneath there.
But that's a big glacier, right?
Yeah, there's something buried here that's holy cow.
Yeah, we can dig into that a little bit more, but I wanna try to grab one or two more topics. So Lemech. So Lemech is an interesting dude. We had this medrash that he's blind and his son is like hauling him around. We pointed out why you can't read that at face value in a literal sense. So that means you have to read it in a symbolic sense, right? There's a metaphor there. And it sounds like the metaphor is something to the effect of Lemech is out to kill. So is Tuval Kayin. And in fact, Tuval Kayin is manipulating Lemech into killing what he wants him to kill. Tuval Kayin seems to have it in for Kayin. He describes Kayin to Lemech as an animal or as something worth killing, and Lemech is blind to that, right? Not literally blind, but he doesn't understand that he's being manipulated by this son who's, bringing him around to try to accomplish whatever the son is trying to do. Lemech falls for it. He kills Kayin, and he's frustrated that he's been manipulated, and he ends up killing his own son. But that's if you just read, if you take the story out of story and talk about, okay, what's the symbolism that the Medrash is trying to illustrate for you, is this is the world that we're in now. Sons manipulate fathers and go after killing grandparents, and then Lemech turns around. And Lemech turns around and brags about this to his wives. right? I know we have Rashi who's telling us he's trying to like woo the women back, but it's, if you read the psukim, he's bragging about it. I killed a guy, I killed a kid, and nothing happened to me. Nothing's going to happen to me for 77 generations. I'm untouchable. And God doesn't show up because of how untouchable Lemech is. I want to prove it to you from the names of Lemech's kids. Lemech's kids all have the same shoresh to their name. There's Yaval and Yuval and Tuval Kayin. They all have the Yud Bet Lamed shoresh. What is Yud Bet Lamed? Yovel. What is Yovel?
50 years.
Yovel, literally, like, make sure I'm not talking out my hat. Yovel literally means, I believe, to return back home. Let's see what Rav Hirsch has to say. Yud Bet Lamed Yovel, bring home.
Huh.
Right? Cain's curse was Nav Nad Tieba Aretz. Right?
You're a wanderer.
You're a wanderer. Lemech says, not anymore. There's no wandering. Everyone can come home. It's Yovel. Come back. We're gonna build society. All of his kids build society. Right?
His kids were named after he killed.
His kids were
Or
no. So his kid. I mean, his
we're
kids
not
are named
trying.
before. It's actually interesting. Usually, you get here's the guy. Here's what he did, and then he had a bunch of kids. In this parak, I think is probably an exception. Now that you pointed out, I didn't think about it. We get the kids, and then the story of the guy. I think he's naming those kids intentionally to show you that whatever Kayin did, we're gonna undo. We're gonna make the world as we see fit because it's a free for all now. There's no God. God doesn't show up anymore and tell you, oh, you made a mistake. Maybe you should try to correct that. Or here's the moral of the story. It's like I think we said last time. You're in Kayin's world now. Kayin killed people and made killing part of the world. And now people just do it. And the fact that God doesn't show up, in a certain way, the reader is almost expecting it, right? You hear story number 1, someone sins, God shows up and tells them, don't do that. Story number 2, someone sins, God shows up and says, don't do that. Story number 3, someone sins and God doesn't.
Crickets.
Nothing. Because that's it. There's no more moral of the story. There's no more happy ending. There's no more God saying, you know what, you sinned, but because you did tshuva, I'm going to protect you. And it's a completely new world, and it's Lemech's world. As scary as that is, that happens to be the reality.
That's a level lower than Kayin, a level lower than Adam Rishon.
It's an embracing of Kayin as almost this is the world we want to live in now. I'm in a world where I can kill that guy. I can do whatever I want. Not only am I going to do it, I'm going to go to my wives and brag about it because there's no morality. And that's, as we continue in the next couple prakim, we're going to see. I mean, the next immediate pasuk is this idea of Azuchal Likro B'Shem Hashem, that they started to profane the name of God. Because there's no, and we're going to get to the Mabul and see how far down it goes, but it starts with Lemech saying, there's no more rules. I'll do whatever I want. Kayin, God, the last act that God did to interact with a person was send Kayin away. Everyone can come back. Not God saying everyone can come back. I say everyone can come back.
Yeah, and then the next step down after killing someone is blasphemy. Like, hey God, what you gonna do?
Right.
Like that. Killing somebody who's B'Tselem Elohim, like that's the worst thing probably.
Yes.
Because at least if got somebody, one of those dudes blasphemies, like theoretically he could just say, I'm sorry. Like, I shouldn't have done that. I feel bad about it.
So I'll tell you something that is not fully formulated, but I started thinking about. The Gemara describes what does it mean to, God forbid, curse God?
Right.
It's not someone saying,
gosh darn it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not someone swearing. The way the Gemara describes it is Yossi Yaka Yossi. That and Yossi is obviously a euphemism for God, but it's someone describing Chalila like God, like Yossi Yaka Yossi means Yossi hit Yossi or Yossi smote Yossi. It's this idea of like self-injury. they're when someone's cursing God, they're not using God's name and affiliating it with something untoward. They're cursing like they want something bad to befall God, and the only way that they can imagine that happening is if God makes bad befall God. That's a very weird concept.
Recursiveness.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's almost like I hope you hurt yourself, right? Like
Right. And it's not a denial of God. Interestingly, it's not atheism.
Right. No, it's not atheism. It's an affirming of God's ability, and then
Yeah, but
twisting that and saying, I hope that ability turns in on itself.
Yeah.
you're being rational in the fact that no one can really hurt God. The only one can hurt God is God.
Right.
So
Right.
it's almost like the ultimate curse.
Right. That's
You really,
pretty.
like, it's like if you say like,
Yeah,
oh,
it
yeah,
says it sounds a
you know,
lot more
I hope-
evil when you talk it
Yeah.
out like that.
yeah, I hope
Wow.
my dad beats you up. Like obviously that's like a silly curse. It's like so it won't hold, not only will it won't hold any water. It's like I'm not even gonna punish you for that because it's just so ridiculous.
Right.
But if you're like giving the ultimate curse, something
Right.
that could actually happen,
Right.
then they would have.
Right.
There's
It's
more substance to it.
It's also
I hear that.
It's also a real commentary to say that to somebody, even not like on a blaspheming level, but to say like to another person, like that makes a very clear statement about what that relationship is.
Yeah.
Like when someone says when you're not allowed to curse another Jew. Why? Because guess what? You're basically saying that the relationship between us is like irreparable. Like that I want bad things,
Right.
not I. I mean
Right.
that the person wants
It's hard to even talk about.
right, that the person wants bad things to happen to this other person with whom he has like a real connection to, and he's trying to sever that connection.
Right.
Like that's a heavy duty thing.
Yeah. It is. It's a very serious thing, and it helps you understand like where a person is in blasphemy. Like I feel like today people treat blasphemy as like, oh, you use a bad word.
Right.
And
No.
like no, this is a theological like
Yeah, this is like a theological atom bomb.
right.
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 This is the game ender. This is
Right.
like this is the tipping over the table and saying we're done here.
Right, exactly.
Right. This is I'm knocking over the board pieces.
Right. It's not something you can do as a slip of the tongue.
Right.
It's not something where like you dropped a brick on your foot and you said the wrong word and now you have to like go do tshuva.
Right. No.
This is
like taking the Monopoly board and throwing it in the fireplace. Like we're never playing this game again.
Right. Right. Okay, so I think that's enough for one bite.
Oh, but I was just getting interested.
And God willing, next week we will pick up with chapter 5.